It started with fake fines and empty threats. Then, 2 men showed up at my door, badges flashing, claiming I was under arrest. What they didn't know? I'm a U.S. Marshal, and they just tried to arrest the wrong guy. Let me tell you how Karen's obsession turned into her downfall. Asterisk I moved into Oak Ridge because it was quiet, peaceful. The kind of neighborhood where you could hear sprinklers ticking at sunset and kids riding bikes on cul-de-sacs until dinner. I'd spent years chasing fugitives across states, working long nights, kicking down doors. I wanted calm, a home where nobody bothered me. For the first few weeks, that's exactly what I got. Fresh air, clean mornings, silence, until the letters started showing up. The first envelope looked official. Crisp white paper, gold HOA logo stamped at the top like it meant something. It read, "Dear homeowner, you are required to register your property under the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. Failure to comply may result in penalties." I frowned, reading it twice. Required? That was funny because I'd chosen this property precisely because it wasn't part of any HOA. I'd made sure of it before signing the deed. I checked the return address. No office number, no website, just a P.O. box. Still, the letter looked formal enough to fool anyone. The second page was even better. A $250 fine for failure to maintain property aesthetics. I glanced out the window at my yard-trimmed grass, clean driveway, my truck parked neatly beside the porch. What exactly was I failing to maintain? I almost laughed. I tossed the letter in the trash and went back to my coffee, figuring it was some clerical mistake. But a few days later, another envelope arrived. This one marked second notice. Then another, and another. By the end of the week, my mailbox was so stuffed it looked like it was choking. Each letter carried a new violation: unauthorized exterior modifications, noise disturbances, failure to submit landscaping plans. I hadn't changed a thing. I barely even used my lawnmower that week. Whoever was sending these letters wasn't making mistakes. They were testing me. I asked around the neighborhood casually, just to see if anyone else had gotten the same thing. Most people smiled nervously and said, no. But one older guy across the street gave me a look, that kind of knowing, tight-lipped look that said, "You'll find out soon enough." That night, I stood by my window, watching porch lights flick on across the cul-de-sac. Something felt off. Every story starts with something small, a knock, a note, a tiny act of control that grows into a storm. This was mine. The next morning, as I pulled another envelope from my mailbox, I noticed something new. The sender's name was printed clearly at the bottom. Karen Whitmore, HOA president. That was the first time I saw her name. And I should have known right then, this wasn't going to be just another neighborly dispute. This was going to be war. Karen Whitmore wasn't just a neighbor. She was a self-appointed ruler in a kingdom nobody asked for. The kind of woman who lived for control, crisp blazers, color-coded clipboards, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She didn't just like rules. She breathed them. And when there weren't enough rules to enforce, she made new ones. The first time I met her, she was standing in my driveway, pen tapping against her clipboard like a metronome of disapproval. "Good morning," she said, voice sweet, but sharp enough to slice through concrete. "I wanted to remind you that you're overdue on your HOA compliance registration." I leaned against my truck, crossing my arms. "I'm not part of your HOA." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, you must be mistaken. Oak Ridge Estates requires full participation from all surrounding homeowners." I chuckled. "Not mine. This property's outside your jurisdiction." Something flickered in her eyes, annoyance, quickly buried under fake politeness. "Well," she said, flipping through her papers, "we all need to do our part to maintain the community's charm. Cooperation is key." "Cooperation?" I asked, smirking. "Or submission?" Her grip tightened on the clipboard. For half a second, the mask slipped. Then she smiled again, too wide, too bright. "Have a nice day," she said, turning sharply on her heel. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next week, the letters multiplied. My mailbox became a shrine to her obsession. Envelopes stamped urgent, final notice, property in violation. I ignored them all. Every last one went straight into the trash. Then came the whispers. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. Conversations hushed when I walked by. At first, I thought it was coincidence until I overheard two women near the corner house. "He's being investigated," one said quietly. "Karen told me he's got legal trouble." Legal trouble. I laughed when I heard it, but deep down, something twisted in my gut. Karen wasn't just playing HOA president anymore. She was building a reputation, crafting a story where I was the villain. A few days later, I caught her outside again, pretending to inspect the sidewalk with a tape measure. She didn't look surprised when I approached. "You've been busy," I said. "Just ensuring everyone follows the standards." She replied, eyes locked on mine. "Even the people who don't belong to your HOA." That made her smile slow, deliberate. "It's important to maintain harmony, Marshal," she said softly. "We wouldn't want conflict in our little community," she said my title on purpose. She'd done her homework, and that's when I realized she wasn't going to stop. That night, I sat on my porch. Letters piled beside me, the air heavy with the smell of cut grass and quiet tension. Karen didn't want compliance. She wanted control. And control to someone like her was oxygen. The difference was, I'd spent years dealing with people who thought power made them untouchable. They all had one thing in common. Eventually, they pushed too far. And when they did, I was the one who pushed back. Asterisk, the first sign that things were getting worse came early one morning. I stepped outside with my coffee and stopped cold. A pile of garbage plastic bags, old takeout boxes, even an empty paint can was dumped across my front yard. Not spilled, placed. Like a message. I looked up and saw curtains move across the street. Karen's window. She was watching. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed a trash bag, cleaned the mess, and went back inside. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't random. It was her way of saying, "I see you." The next week, my mailbox was gone. Not vandalized, ripped out. The metal pole was bent like someone had used a crowbar. A brand new replacement showed up the next day. Delivered by a contractor wearing an HOA polo. When I asked who sent him, he said, "Mrs. Whitmore approved it. She said you'd been notified." Notified. Right? The letters didn't stop either. They came thicker, more aggressive, printed in red ink now. Warning of further action. One even accused me of violating community harmony by displaying unauthorized vehicles. The vehicle in question was my government-issued truck at that point. I stopped being amused. I decided to pay Karen another visit. She was in her driveway. As usual, talking to one of the board members, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. The moment she saw me walking over, her smile stretched tight. "Oh, good morning, Marshal," she said. "Too sweet? Is there a problem?" I held out the latest letter. "Yeah, this one." She tilted her head, pretending to read it. "Oh, that's just a routine notice. You've failed to comply with HOA maintenance standards." "I'm not part of your HOA," I said evenly. "Well," she replied, eyes narrowing, "the board has decided that properties bordering Oak Ridge still affect our image. We all have to do our part." "Karen," I said, my voice low, "let's be clear. You have no authority over me. None. The next time I find one of these in my mailbox, I'll file for harassment. Got it?" Her smile wavered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "You wouldn't want to make this difficult," she said softly. "Cooperation is so much easier than conflict." I took a step closer. "Conflict's kind of my specialty." For the first time, she looked unsure. Then she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. I thought maybe, finally, she'd back off. But that night, as I drove home from a late shift, I noticed something strange. Several neighbors were standing in their yards, whispering. One woman pointed at my house. Another shook her head. When I parked, it scattered. Inside my mailbox was a new letter, this one with bold red text across the top. Final notice. Failure to comply may result in legal action. Below that, a new signature line, Karen Whitmore, HOA president, legal division. She was doubling down. It's escalating. Over the next few days, things got worse. Someone started calling my house phone at night, then hanging up when I answered. A neighbor's kid told me, "My mom says you're in trouble with the law." The rumor had spread Karen was telling people I had a warrant. I dealt with criminals who used fear as a weapon. But this was something else. This was obsession wrapped in authority. And I knew something Karen didn't. When you spend your career hunting con artists and fakes, you learn to spot one instantly. And Karen Whitmore, self-proclaimed Queen of the HOA, was about to expose herself completely. A few mornings later, I found a thick envelope taped to my front door. Not in the mailbox this time. Karen wanted to make sure I saw it. Stamped across the top in bold red letters were the words, "Final legal notice action required." Inside was a document that looked official. Heavy paper, courthouse-style header, legal jargon scattered through every line. The title made me laugh out loud. Warrant for non-compliance with HOA regulations. I stood there in the doorway, sunlight spilling across the page, shaking my head in disbelief. A warrant? Issued by an HOA? That was new. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I carried it inside, set it on my desk, and read every word carefully. At first glance, it mimicked the real thing formal tone, signature lines, even an embossed gold seal at the bottom. But as I read closer, the cracks showed. There was no court number, no jurisdiction listed, no judge's signature, and under authorized by, it read, Karen Whitmore, President Oak Ridge, Estates HOA Legal Department. She'd made herself a judge, a jury, and a law enforcement agency all in one. I couldn't help but grin. It was absurd, but also dangerous. Because while I knew it was fake, most people wouldn't. If she'd sent this to some retiree or single mom, they might have panicked. They might have paid. That's when I realized what Karen was doing. This wasn't about me anymore. She was running a scam system built on fear and fake authority. And if she thought I was going to be another one of her victims, she had picked the wrong man. I took out a notepad and started documenting everything: the letters, the fake fines, the phony warrant. I took photos, logged dates, recorded times. Years in law enforcement had taught me one thing: evidence always wins. But instead of confronting her right away, I decided to wait. People like Karen can't help themselves. They always push too far. And I wanted her to so. I stayed quiet. I didn't reply to her letters, didn't confront her, didn't even mention it to the neighbors. I let her believe the silence meant fear. Sure enough, 2 days later, another notice appeared. This one wasn't in an envelope. It was taped directly to my front window in neon red. Failure to pay fines will result in arrest. I actually laughed out loud. Arrest? By who exactly? The HOA task force. Still, something told me she was planning more. The language in the letters was shifting, more aggressive, more desperate. It wasn't about fines anymore. It was about power. Karen wanted a show. She wanted everyone in the neighborhood to see me submit, to prove she could bring down a federal officer, and I'll admit, part of me was curious. Just how far would she go to play queen of her little kingdom? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of fake paperwork, and smiled. "All right, Karen," I muttered. "Let's see what you do next." I had no idea that within days, she'd take things to a level I'd never imagined, because the next time she came after me, she wouldn't send a letter. She'd send cops. Fake ones. And that's when the real game began. Asterisk. Friday morning started quiet. The kind of quiet that feels planned. No birds, no barking dogs, just that thick. Heavy stillness that tells you something's coming. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I saw them. 2 men standing in my driveway, matching dark uniforms, clipboards in hand, badges clipped to their belts. For a split second, I thought they might be contractors, until one of them knocked on my door and said, "Sir, we're with the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association Enforcement Division." Blinked. The what? The taller one had the kind of confidence that comes from pretending to have power. The shorter one stood behind him, puffing his chest, trying to look intimidating. Both had cheap plastic nameplates pinned crookedly to their shirts. I opened the door slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "Can I help you?" "Yes, sir," the tall one said, flipping a paper on his clipboard. "We're here in response to your repeated violations and failure to comply with HOA regulations. You've been issued multiple warnings, and now an active warrant has been filed for your arrest." I stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "My arrest?" "That's correct," he said, nodding. "You're to come with us for processing." I bit back a laugh. "Processing where? The HOA courthouse?" That threw him. His eyes darted toward his partner, who cleared his throat and said, "Sir, we're not here to argue. You need to come with us peacefully." I folded my arms. "All right, let's see it. See what—" "The warrant," I said. "The real one." "The one signed by a judge?" I hesitated. The taller one shuffled through his clipboard like he was suddenly reading it for the first time. "The HOA board issued this under community authority." I cut him off. "You do know it's a crime to impersonate law enforcement, right?" They froze. I reached slowly into my back pocket. Their hands twitched toward their belts, nothing there but cheap walkie-talkies. I pulled out my badge and held it between two fingers so the morning light caught it. A real, polished silver badge that didn't come from Amazon. "United States Marshal," I said calmly. "Now, I'll ask again, what department did you say you were with?" The taller man's mouth fell open. The shorter one actually took a step back. "Because," I continued, lowering my voice right now, "it looks a whole lot like you two just tried to arrest a federal officer with fake badges and forged paperwork." No one spoke. The air felt electric. The taller man's clipboard slipped from his hand, papers scattering across my driveway. The short one mumbled something about a misunderstanding and bolted toward the street. His partner didn't hesitate. He ran after him. I didn't chase. I didn't have to. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching them scramble like rats when the lights come on. When they were gone, I crouched down and picked up one of the dropped papers. It was another warrant, same gold HOA seal, same phony legal tone. But now I had something new. Names, signatures, a fake company logo at the bottom. Oak Ridge Security Solutions. I smiled. They'd left me breadcrumbs and I knew exactly where they led. Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She'd bulldozed over it. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was criminal impersonation, extortion, and fraud. And she had no idea the person she'd just tried to arrest was about to turn her entire world upside down. Asterisk, after the HOA police incident. My driveway looked like a crime scene, papers scattered, fake badges glinting in the sunlight, and tire marks from two men who had just sprinted for their freedom. I gathered everything, stacked it neatly on my desk, and stared at it for a long time. They thought I was just another homeowner. They had no idea I spent half my life tracking people exactly like them, scammers who thought intimidation was power. So, did what I do best. I started digging. The first thing I did was run the names from the paperwork. Both fake officers had signed their warrants with scribbled, almost identical signatures, Travis R. and Mike G. That was my first clue. Real officers don't sign like that. I ran their supposed security license numbers through the National Registry. Nothing. No record. No permits. Not even a company listed under Oak Ridge Security Solutions. The more I searched, the clearer it became. Karen hadn't just hired rent-a-cops. She'd built an entire fake law enforcement unit out of thin air. But that was just the surface. I dug into public complaints. A few keywords: Oak Ridge HOA fines, harassed man. Suddenly my screen filled with forum posts and legal filings. Homeowners describing stories almost identical to mine. Random citations, unpaid dues, threats of foreclosure, even forced property seizures. One man wrote that the HOA had claimed ownership of his backyard fence line and fined him for unauthorized construction, and he refused to pay. He received a notice of seizure stamped with the same gold emblem I now recognized. He lost his house 2 months later, and who signed off on that seizure? Karen Whitmore. My gut tightened. This wasn't pettiness anymore. It was organized theft. A scam designed to look legitimate long enough to rob people blind. I traced the paper trail further, pulling county court filings, municipal liens, and small claims disputes. Karen's name appeared again and again. But she wasn't acting alone. Every suspicious ruling came from the same local magistrate, the same judge, and every time, the decision conveniently favored the HOA. That's when the full picture hit me. Karen had influence. Either she was bribing the judge, or he was too lazy to verify her claims. Either way, their collaboration had destroyed lives. I sat back, staring at the glowing monitor. My heartbeat slowed. This was bigger than a neighborhood squabble. This was federal. Mail fraud, wire fraud, impersonation of law enforcement. Extortionate checked every box. For a second, I almost admired her. She'd taken the suburban HOA stereotype and turned it into a miniature dictatorship, complete with fake police, fake courts, and fake warrants. But the thing about people like Karen is they never know when to stop, and that's exactly why they get caught. I picked up the fake badge one of her officers had dropped. It was flimsy plastic, stamped with a meaningless number. I turned it over in my hand and whispered to myself, "You just made this federal." That night, I called a contact in the district attorney's office, a friend I'd worked with on a fraud case years back. I didn't give details yet, just told him I was looking into a possible multi-person impersonation scheme. He said, "Keep collecting evidence. Call me when you're ready." I smiled. I would. But first I wanted Karen to feel untouchable one last time. Because I knew something she didn't. If you corner a fraud, they'll always overplay their hand. And when they do, you don't just catch them. You expose them. So I decided to bait her. I grabbed one of her fake citations, the latest. Final notice of legal action, and I wrote back a single, carefully crafted letter. In it, I said I was willing to discuss settlement options and didn't want things to get worse. It was exactly what she wanted to hear. And when she read that letter, I knew she'd take the bait. The next move wouldn't come from me. It would come from her, and she was about to walk straight into the trap. Asterisk playing along was easy. I answered her notice with a short, conciliatory letter, exactly the tone she wanted to see. "I'm willing to discuss settlement options," I wrote. "I don't want things to get worse." It was a baited hook disguised as fear. I mailed it so it looked genuine and waited. Karen took the bait faster than I expected. Within 3 days, I received a response. An invitation to an official arbitration hearing. No courthouse was listed, only an address, a rented community center on Friday at 2 p.m. The email warned failure to appear would result in further penalties. That was confirmation enough. She wanted a performance. It's not a legal proceeding. I called my contact at the district attorney's office and briefed him on the arbitration notice. He agreed it sounded phony and suggested we involve the U.S. attorney because the scheme crossed state lines and used mail and wire communications. I made the call. An assistant U.S. attorney told me she would assemble a small team and be at the hearing. She stressed caution. Don't advertise our involvement. This needed to look organic next. I spoke with the local police captain, an old colleague who owed me one. I told him I suspected impersonation and extortion. He promised plainclothes officers would be staged nearby and ready to move on a discreet signal. No radios, no lights, just a quiet word to trigger action. It had to be surgical. Then came the plan. I picked a corner seat near the back and asked the assistant, U.S. attorney, to enter with 2 federal agents and a couple of county officers. Let Karen run her show. Let her summon her fake officers. And when she pushed for a public arrest or property seizure, we moved in. We wanted witnesses and wanted it public. The more theatrical she planned to be, the worse her downfall. I felt the familiar thrum in my chest, the calculated calm that shows up before a case is ready to close. This wasn't bravado. It was evidence and optics. Karen relied on spectacle to intimidate people. Now, spectacle would expose her. I asked a local reporter, sworn to delay publication until charges were filed, to be in the lobby and document the moment. For 3 days before the hearing, I kept things ordinary. I mowed the lawn, fixed a faucet, and acted like nothing significant was coming. That ordinary rhythm fed Karen's belief. I was flustered in negotiating. On the morning of the hearing, I left my badge at home and wore plain clothes. I didn't want her to cancel. I wanted her to strut into the room with the confidence of a woman who thought she had power. The community center smelled of floor wax and cheap coffee. Chairs were set in neat rows. A folding table served as a dais. Karen's Gavala cheap wooden prop she used to feel official sat on the table when she walked in. She moved like she'd arrived for a coronation. Her smile was wide. Her posture exaggerated. A few homeowners and 2 board members filled the seats, avoiding my eyes. She called the meeting to order with theatrical flourish. The trap was set. All that remained was for her to step into it. I folded my hands and quietly waited. Asterisk, the clock on the wall ticked toward 2 o'clock, each second stretching longer than the last. The community hall was small, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Folding chairs arranged in rows like a courtroom that couldn't afford walls. A cheap banner behind the table read, Oak Ridge, HOA arbitration. Karen sat at the head of the table, her clipboard and stack of forged documents spread like trophies before her. She wore a navy blazer and a smirk that said she thought this was already over. On either side of her sat 2 board members, nervous, pale, shifting in their seats. I took a chair at the front, calm, hands folded on the table. She didn't even look up at first, just cleared her throat and started reading in a clipped, rehearsed tone. Mr. Lawson, she began, you've been found in continuous violation of Oak Ridge Community Code Section 4B, failure to maintain property standards, refusal to submit landscaping plans, and repeated harassment of HOA representatives. Today's hearing will determine. Karen, I interrupted, my voice steady. Let me stop you there. She looked up sharply, clearly annoyed. You'll have your turn to speak after the charges are read, she said. Right, I said, leaning back. But see, I'm curious about something. Exactly who gave you the authority to hold a legal hearing? The room went still. The homeowners glanced at each other. Karen's smile tightened. Oak Ridge Estates operates under an approved charter that grants the board full arbitration rights. That's funny. Ow, I said, cutting her off again. Because I checked the county records this morning. There's no charter filed under Oak Ridge Estates. No registered legal entity. No business license. In fact, there isn't even an HOA listed in this county. Her cheeks flushed. You're mistaken, she snapped. I stood slowly, taking my time, my chair scraping against the floor. And one more thing. The men you sent to my house last week? The ones who tried to arrest me? The board members shifted uneasily. One of them whispered, You sent people to his house? Karen glared at him. That's irrelevant, she said quickly. Those officers were conducting standard fake arrests. I interrupted again, my tone low. You hired unlicensed security officers and told them to pretend to be police. That's impersonation of law enforcement. A federal crime. Karen's face lost its color. Her hand twitched near the gavel. This meeting is over, she said suddenly. You're being uncooperative, I smiled. Actually, Karen, it's just getting started. Right on cue, the doors at the back of the room burst open. The sound was sharp, echoing off the cinder block walls. Real officers, not the plastic kind, poured in, their presence instant and commanding. The room froze. At the center of them walked a woman in a tailored suit, confident and composed, Assistant U.S. Attorney Morales. She stepped forward, papers in hand, voice calm but firm. Karen Whitmore. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. I'm with the U.S. Attorney's Office, Morales continued, holding up an official document. You are under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, extortion, and impersonation of law enforcement. Karen stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. No, wait, this is a misunderstanding. Morales didn't blink. No, Ms. Whitmore, she said evenly. This is justice. The officers moved in, cuffing Karen's wrists as the board members backed away like the floor had turned to fire. The gavel she had been so proud of rolled off the table and clattered onto the floor. One homeowner gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God." It was all fake. Karen's voice cracked as she pleaded, "You can't do this." I was trying to protect the community. I crossed my arms. No, Karen, you were trying to control it. As she was escorted out, she turned toward me, her face a mix of disbelief and rage. You set me up, she shouted. I didn't move. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. The door closed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in the room. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the assistant U.S. attorney placed the warrant folder on the table and said, "We'll be collecting all of these documents. Anyone else involved should stay put." I looked around the room at the frightened board members, the stunned homeowners, and the cheap banner that still hung crookedly behind the empty chair where Karen had ruled, the queen of the HOA had fallen. And this time, the law she'd been faking finally came for her for real. When the doors slammed shut behind Karen, the room stayed silent for a long time. You could still hear the faint echo of her voice down the hallway, shrill, desperate, fading with every step the officers took. Then came the murmur. The board members whispering to one another, homeowners exchanging stunned looks, the slow realization sinking in that everything they'd believed in had been built on lies. The assistant U.S. attorney turned to me. "We'll take it from here," she said, her voice calm, professional. "But you'll want to stick around. There'll be statements, evidence collection, maybe press later." I nodded. Wouldn't miss it. Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of the community center. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, onlookers, even people from nearby streets. News travels fast in quiet suburbs, especially when the queen of the HOA is being shoved into the back of a police car. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Karen's perfect hair, her perfect posture, her perfect image, all of it crumbling under the weight of handcuffs. She kept shouting through the open window, "This is a mistake. I was helping people. You don't understand?" But no one was buying it anymore. I watched from the sidewalk, arms folded as she disappeared into the flashing lights. That night, the story broke online. Local HOA president arrested for fraud and extortion. It spread fast, local news, then regional, then national. Reporters camped outside the Oak Ridge subdivision for days, interviewing homeowners who'd been scammed or intimidated by Karen's phony regulations. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd targeted. There were dozens of us. People who had received fake fines, illegal threats, and even foreclosure notices. Some had paid thousands just to keep her off their backs. Others had lost their homes entirely. But now, the truth was out. The DAS office uncovered a paper trail so thick it could have filled a filing cabinet. Forged letters, falsified financials, fake legal documents, even emails between Karen and her so-called HOA enforcement division. The two fake officers confessed within days. They told investigators everything. How Karen paid them in cash, gave them scripts, and promised community bonuses if they made homeowners comply. Within a week, the Oak Ridge HOA board dissolved. The members claimed ignorance, but the investigation didn't stop there. Every questionable fine, every phony violation, every illegal foreclosure, all of it was reviewed. The county ordered restitution for every affected homeowner, and the neighborhood changed. Overnight, people started talking again. Neighbors who'd been strangers for years came together over coffee, sharing their stories, laughing at how blind they'd been. The fear that had hung over Oak Ridge like a storm cloud was gone. As for Karen, her bail was denied. The judge called her a danger to the community she claimed to protect. The same woman who used to threaten people with legal action was now facing real charges: mail fraud, wire fraud, impersonation of law enforcement, and conspiracy to commit extortion. When I saw her mugshot online, I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, just closure. For the first time in months, Oak Ridge was quiet again. The kind of quiet I'd been looking for when I moved there, but now, that silence meant something else. It meant peace. A week after Karen's arrest, the neighborhood looked different. The same houses stood, the same trees swayed in the breeze, but something invisible had lifted. The tension that once hummed beneath the surface, the sideways glances, the whispered rumors, The constant anxiety of living under someone's thumb, it was all gone. I sat on my porch that evening, the same spot where I'd once read her endless letters, and listened. Real quiet this time. Kids laughing down the street, a lawnmower humming a few doors away, the smell of barbecue drifting through the air. For the first time since I moved in, Oak Ridge actually felt like a neighborhood again. The mailman stopped by and grinned. "No HOA letters today, Marshal," he said jokingly. "Let's keep it that way," I replied. Handing him a bottle of water, he laughed and walked off, and I leaned back in my chair, letting the sunset burn gold across the rooftops. Karen's house sat empty now, foreclosure signs in the yard. Windows dark, the once perfect flower beds dry and overgrown. A few buyers had already come to look, none staying long. Maybe they felt it, that faint echo of control, of fear, of what she'd tried to build there. Funny thing about power, it never lasts when it's fake. I'd spent my life dealing with people who thought they could twist authority for their own gain. Criminals, con artists, sometimes even officials who forgot what the badge meant. Karen was just another version of them, wrapped in suburban arrogance and gold-embossed lectures as the last light faded. I thought about all the homeowners she'd bullied, the ones who'd felt trapped, scared, voiceless. They were free now. And justice, for once, had arrived not in a courtroom, but in their own call. Sack. I took one last sip of my coffee and smiled. Karen thought she could arrest me. What she didn't know was that she'd just written her own warrant. Now, Oak Ridge was peaceful again. No fake police, no bogus fines, no queen of the HOA. Just quiet. Real quiet, and every time I walk past her old house, I can't help but think. In the end, she didn't get me arrested. She got herself caught.